that with her class, students from the collaborative design program at Kendall have been working with Elgro and Grand Rapids Whitewater for a couple of years now, helping us think through what it looks like to document this process of river restoration. So recognizing this is a once in a lifetime opportunity and we need to be able to keep track of what this change looked like. So remember what it looks like now and document the whole process, both with photographs and videos, but also just orally and historically how this process happened. So they've been really working with us on that and doing a great job. And this is an activity that Elizabeth developed to help us facilitate feedback from all different groups of people on what they wanted to see in the restoration. So we want her to walk you guys through that process, and then as you're doing that, kind of think about how you might be able to engage your students in doing a similar exercise in class, because it's really important to incorporate the youth voice into what's happening in this process.
So we have developed a couple activities and a couple different methods of telling a story and talking as a group about what we saw on the Riverwalk, what we already know about the River Restoration Project, and who stakeholders are in the project. We think that's really important as design students. We think it's really important to understand who the stakeholders are, what they care about, and how we can get them involved in the process. So the first activity that we developed is called Grand River Stories, which is a page that everyone should have in front of them. This is a longer activity than some of the other activities we'll do, but this would be for someone who really enjoys writing down their stories or sketching their stories. So you would start to fill this out from top to bottom, who you are, and then if these sections, what's the story theme and who's the audience, are a little difficult to answer up front, then you start at the bottom and start actually telling a story. And it's not the story about what we were just doing on the river walk. It could be that, but it could be what was their favorite interaction with the river in the past. Have they ever been to the river? Have they ever been to the museum? Have they been to Riverside Park? So you would start to write that story and then discover what was the theme of that story, who's your audience, and then in this sticky note right here we talk about, in Kendall we talk about rapid ideas and rapid prototyping. This is just a sticky note that we'll put up on the wall to start to discover the links between our stories. So on this sticky note, please use a Sharpie and write 1 to 3 words to just describe what your story was about. Where if you have that sticky note with 1 to 3 words on it, whoever feels comfortable, if they would like to, take your sticky note, walk up to the what's your story part one at a time, and just briefly explain what you wrote down and why.
Okay, all right. So my stories started out that last year our 7th graders canoed on the Grand River, and it was upstream, but it was really beautiful because the biodiversity of the area really opened my eyes, because often you think of the Grand River as an urban, so seeing upstream, and in the midst of that day you see the herons. We had a deer that was swimming across the river that we saw. Wow. So it was that moment I know will live in my life for a very long time, but we'll continue that for our students every year now. It's a component of our 7th grade year. But the 3 words then that popped out were the educational experience for students. We took in the biodiversity, but we also, through recreation, powerfully connected to that space. Did I do that right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right.
Just
so
pick it up anywhere you want.
All right. So I mean,
it's on the what's the story.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Oh, so where it was, so we'd be upstream, probably up there.
And the last exercise we have is a different way of storytelling and drawing connections. Is this big map up here? Let's say blue is important places that we visited today that you enjoyed. Yellow would be where you learned something interesting, and red is other. Riverside Park is really important to you. Maybe it's your home. Yeah.
This is actually also available. There's a smaller PDF that just shows the upper and the lower restoration, and it's available online, and you can download it and you can see kind of what they expect it to look like. This is from 2013, so the plan has changed a little bit since then, but it's pretty close.
I'm really fun about it.
Develops a graph with notation and information on it as we do the board on the wall. And so what I've broken down is the history into some pretty big chunks, which is pre-settlement, and then 1615 to 1800, 1800 to 901, to 1900, 1900 to 2000, and then today. So kind of taking a look at what's happened in the river, and then the idea being to have them take some look at some actual primary artifacts and what's happening in the river. So there's a packet for each section, but in each packet, there is at least one article, a narrative about that time, written at that time. Or in the very first one, this one is probably like a high school level only or challenge one, but it's evidence of early hunters beneath the Great Lakes. So it's talking about how do we find about those Paleo Indians, what research do we actually have, because there's not a lot of information out there. And then there are some images talking about what's going on. So this one has some images of the Hopewell Mounds at the Norton ones. And then if your students have access, they can go to the Vimeo and watch the video about those and research and learn that. And then just other packets or images that talk about or give you examples of how people might use these. So they can look at these to think about the 3 questions, which are, in what ways do people living near the river benefit from the river? How did humans impact or change the river? And how might have people living near the river have viewed the river during this time? So they can look at the artifacts to answer those questions. And then this is where you definitely want to think about what level for your students. I put with each one just a short summary of what's happening here, but I would say this is written like high school, and you would want to take out or change wordings to level for where you teach, but I thought it's easier to delete and remove stuff than to add stuff back in. So there's probably more than you want or need, but it's nice to have that information and then just take out what you don't need. And for a lower level, you maybe don't need this at all. Maybe you just want the pictures, right? So what works in your class? What would they need? But the idea being that you would chunk it for the different levels in your class, and then they can take, and I have scissors and glue, some of these images, the pictures, things that you think are important or stories you'd want to tell. You have that section on the board to fill out what's important for people to know about this time period, put images, draw pictures, do what you can, and then have each group share out to the class what they should learn. So in the end, everybody's learned about the different time periods and how humans use the river. So, okay, kind of switching modes is thinking about this play space, and we talked about like giving students a context of the history, what's happened with the river. Another part for me is thinking about a lot of my students come from one area, or they spent a lot of one time, they have their personal experience with the river and how they get to the river, but not really an idea that not everybody has access or equal access, or there is an issue with equity and how you can travel around the city. One of the activities I'm really looking forward to doing with my students, because I want to see what they're saying, and I wish that I had done it already, was to look at once the rapids are restored, if we said back here, everyone should have a say in it, does everybody have a way to get to it? Is it equal access for everyone? Because if we're talking about city planning, we're talking about the dry and the wet. Do we need to think about transportation routes, bus routes? If this is going to be a draw for people from across the country, what if people from our community can't get there? So what I want to do with you is have you kind of put student modes on. And do you want to work with a partner? Because it's just funner to work with a partner.
Yes.
Okay. So with a partner, what I have is how do we get access to the Grand River? So I'm just going to
Give one for everybody.
I can just give one to everybody. You can work with a partner. And for some reason, my printer knew that we were going to be talking about the river, so there's extra glue on everything. Yeah, that's the idea. But I figure that our students are, depending on what school you're from, they might not all be from different neighborhoods. So in my class, I'd probably assign neighborhoods also just for some equity issues, and I don't want to have kids who all look the same, all looking at the same areas with the same issues. But the idea is, there is, again, you can see there's a neighborhoods of Grand Rapids map. If you click on here, or the link is right here. And it's the Community Research Institute, which is part of Grand Valley. And they have a lot of demographic data on the different communities.
That's what these sheets are that I was handing out.
Yeah.
So if you go to that website, you can get all those other neighborhoods too.
So just to read through, how many people live in the neighborhood, so what population's there, and then what percent of the population's under 20, so who might not be able to drive there. What percent is over 65, again, might not be driving. And then go to Google and then find an intersection in your neighborhood, so you could assign that if you wanted to as a teacher. give them addresses for neighborhoods, or you can just find one that makes sense for you because you live in that neighborhood. But then on the back, there's kind of a sheet to fill out, but like, what's the travel time by car? What's the travel time by bus, by bike, by walking? Bonus is figure out the Uber price. But, and then just, do you have to transfer? Is there wait times? Are there days when you can't get there using that mode of transportation? What's the cost if you're taking the bus or if you're Ubering? And then, is there safety issues? So you can go on Google Earth, and if you're gonna walk that path on Google Earth. Are there actually sidewalks that somebody can walk on, or are they gonna be in a dangerous place? And then, would you use this mode of transportation? So just kind of dive into this neighborhood a little bit, learn about it, and then can they get to the river from this neighborhood easily? And then there's a couple of analysis questions that what I'll probably do with us, if we think maybe 15, 20 minutes to dive in, see how it goes, and then share out, like, in your neighborhood, do people need transportation to the river? Do they have access to get there if they don't have a car?
And just to go back to something Elizabeth said this morning when she was leading the facilitated part, a lot of these are questions that have been considered as part of this process. Not all of them are, most of these access questions are not, within the scope of work of Grand Rapids Whitewater. They're working on the wet part. The dry part, the city part, is where the city is coming in and looking at all of those issues of equity and access. And so if you want more information about some of the city's planning process for that, that's where that River for All project comes in, where they have really started to look at some of that stuff. So just to make you aware that there's kind of two different sources for information depending on whether you're looking at the in-river or the dry land part of the process.